Hi again from the garden. It's Christina from Sunshine and Flora. It is Memorial Weekend and I thought that this was the perfect time to do the very first official garden tour of the season. Now, if you are new to my channel, I grow cut flowers in Zone 5A in Northwest Iowa that I sell at local farmers markets. I also take a lot of special orders, and I have recently formed a partnership with a local business who carries my flowers. So it's going to be a really exciting garden season. Now, my garden is technically called an urban garden. It is downtown in our small town located right next door to my photography studio. So it is all fenced in. I have a little greenhouse where I keep plants and start my seedlings, but it's just a really fun space. I only grow on about 2,000 square feet of space, and so I am definitely a small scale cut flower farmer, but I am quickly realizing that I could definitely use more space. But this is what I have to grow on as of right now. So anyway, I just want to give you a tour of what the garden is looking like right now. It's very early in the season, but I do have a lot growing, and I also have a lot more to plant. So the first area that I want to show you is this area right in front of the greenhouse. You'll notice that I have landscape fabric laid. I'm laying landscape fabric in most of the garden this year just to suppress the weeds, keep the soil more moist underneath the fabric, and basically to suppress the weeds. I had a lot of trouble with weeds last year, and I really wish that I would have laid landscape fabric at the beginning of the season. But anyway, this area in front of my greenhouse is all Rudbeckia. There's about 4 different varieties in this area, and I have them all spaced at 9 inches apart. Then around the sides of the greenhouse, on both sides, are all of my snapdragons. I don't even know how many varieties of snapdragons I started this year, 20, but these are spaced at 6 inches apart. And you'll notice that I already have some blooms on a couple of them. Now, these are not quite long enough to use in bouquets yet. I'll probably just cut them for myself and use them in a jarred arrangement, but when I cut them, that's going to stimulate more growth from the bottom, and these plants should thicken up pretty quick, and I hope to be harvesting snapdragons in a few weeks. So this is only my second year growing cut flowers to sell them at markets. So last year being my first year was a huge learning experience, and I did not even do my first farmer's market until after the 4th of July. So my goal this year was to have a lot of blooms earlier in the season to obviously make more income earlier, but also be able to take advantage of those June farmer's markets, because in my area, the June farmer's markets can be some of the busiest ones because everyone is excited for the start of summer. A few days ago, I recently cleaned out all of my tulip beds. I had a really great season selling tulips. I also figured out right away that I did not plant enough bulbs, and so I have ordered all of my bulbs for next year already, about 4,000 of them to start with, and I am already excited for next year's tulip season. So the next area of the garden that I want to show you is across the path here from the greenhouse. So this whole planting bed is made up of a few different varieties of flowers. Again, these are all planted in landscape fabric, and these are all 9 inches apart. The taller plants at the front here is all feverfew. I planted that out relatively early because technically feverfew is a cool flower and it can withstand some frost. And so those plants, which I can see some buds from here, are really starting to put on growth, and I should have some blooms pretty soon from those. Now, right in front of me, this is all ageratum. I think this is the Timeless mix, which I get most of my seeds from Johnny's. To be honest, when I put these in the ground, they did not look amazing. I think they had been in their cell taste too long, but they have really started to put on some growth. I've already clipped off some blooms, and so they're starting to branch out even more, but I am really excited to see how this grows this year. Feverfew and ageratum were something that I did not grow last year, and I wanted more accents and foliage for my bouquets this year, so those are 2 of the main ones that I am trying. Now behind me, this is all Status that I just planted a few days ago. And Status was something that I grew just a little bit of last year and wished I had more. I loved that as a texture in the bouquets. And so I have about 8 different varieties of Status planted, and I am really excited to have all of that for this year. Not only in fresh flower bouquets, but also for dried flowers. And then across the path from me, this is all of my snapdragons. At the front of the snapdragon patch, I do have a little area of dianthus. I'm trying that for the first time this year, so I just have about 20 plants or so. So that'll be really fun to see how that develops too. I like to grow a lot of the varieties that I know work well for me, and then when I'm trying something new for the first time, I usually just start one cell tray of them and grow a little bit because of my limited space, and then that way I know whether it's going to work or not and whether I should grow it for the following year. The next bed that I want to show you is actually directly in front of me, out of camera view. So if we pan around from where I was, ignore my lovely air conditioner, this entire bed space will be dahlias this year, which clearly I need to weed it a little bit, but I have just amended this soil with an organic garden soil. It's by Nature's Care. This area also was an area that I just had some tulips planted, and so those have all been cleaned out. Then I amended the soil, and this is all ready to plant dahlias. I'm hoping to get all of my dahlias in the ground next week. And then if we continue swinging right, this is the back edge of my photography studio, and that open door is into my garden shed, and this is a pergola that my dad and I built last year. I absolutely love this space, and I can't wait to put all kinds of potted plants here this year. I also think I need a little sitting area. Then if we continue panning to the right, this particular bed is about 4 foot deep and 18 feet long. This is where I grew my dahlias last year, which was not enough space. So this year, this bed will be celosia, which will be the perfect size for all of the celosia that I'm growing. I plan to get all of my celosia in the ground this week, and they will be spaced in landscape fabric at 12 inches apart. So this is a view of the back side of my greenhouse, which we just had some storms roll through a couple weeks ago, and I lost a couple of my panels. I have a couple more ordered, and so those will be replaced next week. But the whole back side of my greenhouse is planted with basil. Basil was something that I grew a little bit of last year and used as a filler, and I absolutely loved it. And so I think I have roughly probably 72 plants, one cell tray size in here. I have dark opal basil, lemon basil, which seriously smells just like lemons. I love it. And then cinnamon basil. And I have another cell tray of basil started as a succession planting that I will be planting outside of the garden. But this first batch of basil should give me some really nice foliage, hopefully in a month or so. Now I'm going to swing the camera around to this large planting space right in front of me that is currently empty, but I want to share with you what is all going in this space. So this large planting area is just to the west of my greenhouse, and you can see one little patch of tulips that are left there. I'm hoping they bloom. Some of the petals look a little bit dried out, but I couldn't pull them just in case they are still blooming yet. They're the renowned unique variety. But this is the area where most of my tulips were planted this year, and they all just got pulled a couple days ago. So I have since then amended the soil, and my plan for this area is to cover the whole thing with landscape fabric, and this will be where all of my zinnias and the rest of my dahlias will go. So my zinnias will go about 3/4 of the way over, and then over here on the end, let me turn the camera. This whole area, I will put 2 more rows of dahlias in, and I will have about an 18-inch walking path in between all the plants. So I am really excited to get this whole patch ready to go for zinnias and dahlias. I'm hoping to do that next week, which I will film a video of course. But zinnias and dahlias will be some of my main focal flowers in my summer bouquets, those and sunflowers, and so I wanted a nice large space for all of those focal flowers. Now behind me is another planting space. This is against my neighboring building here, so this does get shade part of the day. But in this little area, I have some perennials. Last year I planted about 10 astilbe plants, and those are coming up really nicely. And so I'm excited to see the texture that those add into my bouquets this year. And then this area behind me, this is all currently planted with Bupleurum, which is another really nice filler. It's also a cool flower. And so I planted these a few weeks ago while we were still having some cooler temperatures, and they have literally doubled in size, I swear, in the last few days after we've had some really nice rain. I had never grown Bupleurum before. I did have some troubles with it germinating inside. It's recommended that you direct sow that. So for my second and third succession plantings, that's what I plan on doing. But I wanted to try to get a little head start and start it inside, so I did. So I do have quite a few plants down here that are looking really good. And then over on this end is a bunch of my yarrow. So let me take you over there and show you that. So this is the main area of the garden where I am growing yarrow, and you can see some of these larger plants in front of me. Those were started last year, so they are much larger. The rest of this were all plants that I started inside over the winter and then planted out, oh, maybe a month ago, because yarrow also is a cool flower and can take on some frost. And they're actually doing really good. They're starting to put on a lot of growth. And yarrow was one of my favorite accent flowers last year, and so I wanted to have a lot more of that for this year. At the back of this bed, I do have some stock plants planted and some random larkspur plants. So I don't even know if those will bloom, but I just thought I would tuck them in there just in case they did. Then directly behind me in this small patch of landscape fabric, that is my Lisianthus. And if you have ever started Lisianthus from seed, you know that it is pretty tricky to grow. So I once again did not have the best luck this year, but I definitely have way more plants than I did last year, which I am totally happy with. So any Lisianthus that I get out of the garden to put in bouquets is a bonus to me. All right, there's just a couple more areas that I want to show you for today in the garden. This is probably the worst looking spot in the garden, but you know, we all have those. I wanted to show it to you anyway. This is a raised bed that I was trying to rebuild this year because, as you can see, I have a bad grass problem here. When I originally built this bed, I just put the dirt right down on top of the grass. I didn't think about how it would grow up through the grass. I didn't put cardboard down first, which I definitely should have. So I have been fighting the grass in this bed for probably 5 years. So this front area where you can see I have some ranunculus planted that aren't doing super well, this I completely dug out and put the cardboard down and refilled it with soil. So this is actually looking pretty good. This back half of the garden, I have been trying to suppress it with landscape fabric for the entire winter, but this is a project that will be upcoming. I want to dig it out, take all of the grass roots out, put cardboard down in new soil, and hopefully have a fresh new planting area this year. But this bed is always where I grow my sunflowers, which you can see a lot of them coming up here in the background. This particular bed is about 6 foot deep and 22 feet long, so not huge, but this is where I put a few succession plantings of sunflowers each year. And then I do have one other spot where I plant sunflowers, which I'll show you at the end of the video, but there is just one more little area inside the fenced-in garden that I want to show you quick on this tour. So in the front corner of this garden, which you can see cars going by, my studio is on Main Street, so we are facing out on Main Street, but these two planters are also planted with ranunculus, and let me just take you in a little bit closer because these plants I hope will be shooting up buds at any moment. So these ranunculus plants are looking so good. I mean, look at the leaves on these. They are so healthy. I cannot wait to see the blooms that come off of these plants. So the last area that I plant in that I want to show you is actually on the outside of my fenced-in garden, and that is a cottage garden area that I made. So let me take you out there and show you that. So this is my main planting area in my cottage garden. It is filled with some annual celosia that I use as a foliage, but other than that, it is mainly filled with perennials, such as echinacea, rudbeckia, dianthus, and shasta daisies. I do have a mahogany splendor hibiscus tucked right in over here in the corner, which should get taller than this fence. But this entire area should fill in solid this year and will be great to harvest from for market bouquets. I do have a plan for some annuals that will fill this space here. That will be where my gomphrena, marigolds, and straw flower go. But other than that, this is all really nice perennials that come back year after year. And the last area that I utilize, which is definitely not the most photogenic area, is this long bed that I made out behind my building. This is the neighboring building. It's a co-op. And this bed spans the entire length of their building, and it is 96 feet long and 3 feet deep. This is where I plant all of my specialty pumpkins, and I also plan to plant 1 row of sunflowers here this year. The row of sunflowers will be right next to the building, and the pumpkins will be in front of them and will vine directly out from them. I think it's going to be a really great combination. Last year I planted zinnias within my pumpkins and it worked great, so I think the sunflowers are going to work even better. Well, that's going to do it for this garden tour. I hope you guys enjoyed seeing just a quick glimpse around the garden. I know there's not a lot happening, definitely not a lot blooming right now, except for those couple random snapdragons. But you know, we're just a few weeks out from things really starting to take on some growth. Everything should be planted by the end of next week, and I am just really excited to see what this season brings. So anyway, stay tuned for a lot more cut flower planting, bouquet making, and everything else throughout the entire summer. We'll see you soon.